Recording in progress.
Welcome everybody to the December 4th meeting of the Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee. We'll get started. This meeting is going to be just an update on a lot of little odds and ends. I don't expect any major issues or major decisions to have to be made today. Well, let's see how it goes. So, I don't think there are any changes to the agenda, which brings us to the minutes approval from August 7th. So we're going to hold off on that vote, actually. Okay, very good.
That'll give us quorum.
Okay.
We can approve the minutes then.
Let us just go to item number 4 then, which is contracting updates. So we have several people from the MRB group here, our consultants that are helping us through. So Michael, Tracy, Scott, welcome, and why don't you take it away?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. On the contracting side, we are pretty close to fully contracted. There's one outstanding contract that I need to touch base with Jesse and Samantha about, for Jesse primarily about insurance, but all the other contracts have been executed. We've actually gotten into a stage now where we're needing to make some amendments based on scopes needing to change for whatever reason or timelines changing. So we have been working through a number of amendments, which were included in the packet. A few of them have been amended outside of the original program guidelines for various reasons. Mostly it's projects under $25,000 have been extended past December 31st. Some of those were because they were in the second round of awardees and they needed to adjust their timeline a little bit. For instance, Discovery Trail was in the second round of awards, and they wanted to align their funding with the 2023-2024 program year, which goes into the spring. So that seemed like a reasonable thing to do given the circumstances. So we have a few executed amendments, a few pending, and then one has been requested by the Mental Health Association. Items included in the scope did come under the budget or do align with the budget, but they would also like to add some additional supplies that has been acquired. So we're just working through what we can include and what we can't include in that amendment because they had a little bit of funding left over. But yeah, no, that's the main update. At this point, we still have about $100,000 of completed projects, and the rest are, as I mentioned, mostly fully executed and underway.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Tracy? Okay, I would just say in general, there are several of these pretty minor changes. We're trying to be flexible. We're trying to be easy. Our goal is to get this money in the hands of people that are doing good projects in our community. And as long as, everything is in accordance close, with the idea of the project as they applied for it, and as long as the accounting's all good, I'm completely satisfied with these changes. But we just wanted to make sure that they were talked about in public and that everybody knew that there are these minor tweaks to several projects. So, any other comments before we continue? All right. How about reporting and vouchering update?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Just to give everybody a quick report on the reporting and vouchering. To date, we've submitted, I'd say approximately 63 because we have 4 or 5 that we're working on additional information. So there's 63 pay apps for approximately almost $1.5 million, $1,460,000 have been submitted for request. As I said, we do have 4 or 5 that are out there with additional information and documents that we're going back and forth to verify payments, but that's where we're at to date with the projects. For the reporting and payouts.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about that? Deborah?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I'm just not sure exactly what that means. So 1.46 million is less than certainly the amount that we put out there. So where exactly are these monies in the process?
Well, we've had a number of projects that have not submitted any request yet for the money, like Cayuga Health is $1.5 million. These are the number of requests that have come into us for review and recommendation. A number of the projects are submitting quarterly, like their payroll or whatever the projects were for. So if their contracts are a year out, they're only 2 quarters into it, or even 1 quarter into it for some of them. So it's just a matter of where they're at in their project status for what they've submitted for.
Okay, so am I understanding correctly that this $1,460,000, that's what's been submitted and the rest is still out there waiting for people to claim
To
it?
submit.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. These are requests that have been submitted for review and recommendation. As I said, there's probably 4 or 5 that we're still working on additional information or working with them to get better documentation on what they've spent, and that it meets the scope of the contracts and the projects. And so then we'll wait for the quarter ends. So in January, the request was for them to have them in the first week of January for the next round. So we'll hopefully see, a number of 4th quarter requests come in beginning of January and out the door in the month of January.
Okay, I guess I didn't realize that this was reimbursement.
Right, I was just going to mention that to remind everyone, this is a reimbursement grant. There are a number of awardees who had requested waivers to that, and so those are being accommodated, but the majority of them are reimbursement grants. So that's why all the money hasn't gone out the door yet. But the projects might be underway, they're just funding it for themselves until they submit their vouchers. You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Okay, anything else about reporting and vouchering before we move on? Okay, the next agenda item is core mission support.
Yes, so this has come up, and I'll let Scott speak to it a little as well, but core mission support has come up with a few of the applicants. Basically, what this comes down to is overhead and administration for the organizations. It's not unusual for grants to provide a percentage of the amount for core mission support. However, and those that requested operational funds within their budget, that fits right in, so it's not a problem. However, as we get requests for core mission support from organizations that don't have operating costs in their budget, we are just looking for some guidance on how we should be handling that. Should we be doing contract amendment, or is the committee okay with us making some amendments to allow for that? Or would you like us to stick to the original budget based on what was submitted? So I don't know if, Scott, you have some examples or some specific or anything to add there.
I would just add it's more of a reporting mechanism with your finance department. So some of the requests are coming in and they're just saying 10% core mission, and they're asking for, $3,000 a quarter, but there's no verification or documentation on what that's covering and if it's allowable cost within the ARPA funding. So finance is being really specific on what they need for documentation to show that. So whether we transfer that into salary costs for their administration and their employees, or supply costs that they can provide documentation for. But some of the requests are just coming in and saying 10% core mission without any documentation, and that's tough for your county finance to pay out without documentation. And I think maybe Samantha's in the room, she might be able to add to that as well.
Yeah, for the treasury guidance, they need documentation that not only was it spent, but they need the proof of payment as well. So they can put the 10% core mission support on their invoice, but we need proof that they paid that. And like HSC is one of them, they're a big agency, and their 10% core mission support is spread over a large, vast of expenses. So it's going to be difficult for them to give us the documentation. 10% core mission support is generally acceptable without proof of payment for other grants. You know, it's accepted by the federal government, it's accepted by the state, but within the ARPA guidelines, we need the backup documentation. So, yeah, if we can be a little bit more lenient for those agencies, especially the agencies that, the smaller agencies who aren't used to the grants, it'd go a long way.
Deborah?
Well, my understanding is that what you're trying to comply with are the Treasury guidelines, and if we don't comply with them, then we're on the hook.
Yes.
We have to give that money back. So, you know, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to be pretty inflexible about requiring the documentation, because I have no interest in having to give money back, plus the money that we've given to the grantees, so.
Right. Well, what they're asking for is in lieu of 10% core mission support, because it is a lot of work on me to go through every single invoice and approve, okay, we need 10% of each one of these. If we could tell them, instead of in lieu of the 10% core mission support, can they charge some administrative costs that is being applied to
The particular grant.
Yeah,
Yes.
the particular program they're doing. And then it'd be a lot less work on our end, a lot less review on finances and when it does go to them. And then, yeah, the agency also would save the time by not having to pull all of those invoices that they're getting the 10% on.
So is that, for example, payroll,
Like, yep,
a payroll report?
yes. Oh.
I just told her to use the mic.
Right.
No, so I just wanted to clarify. So you're talking about a payroll report or an exact invoice that would equal the amount?
Yes, yep.
That doesn't seem unreasonable.
Reasonable, yeah.
Are we getting, Tracy, are we getting pushback on that kind of a request from grantees?
I don't think we're getting pushback. I think that that's not how their contracts are worded, so we're looking for the flexibility to maybe accept that in lieu of core mission, so it's easier for us to provide documentation. And I think it is a little difficult, as she said, with some of these smaller organizations that have other grants. It is acceptable for them, so for us to go back and say we need more, it's a little more for them that they don't have to do on other grants, so there is a little more time and back and forth to try to justify that spending. So I think it's more of, and Tracy can correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of, can we be flexible and just amend those without, going through the contract again?
Randy?
CCE, Cornell Crop Centers, went through this overhead rate discussion, and they were only charging 10% because they couldn't support their documentation, and that was an acceptable, that's the most you can charge, I believe, that you're not going to get audited over it. But since then, they've analyzed that, and they're up around 14, 15%, so I think 10% is fair. But I agree with Deborah on this, approving these without documentation is going to be a struggle. But I also think you do need some flexibility. Maybe it needs to be based on the total size of the grant. We'll give you flexibility up to a certain number, and if it's a larger grant, we should discuss it, but I'm open for anything. So.
Joan?
I was just wondering if we need to check in with our federal funders to make sure that adding that flexibility will not be a problem on their end, particularly if it's not in compliance with a written contract. So just asking the question.
I think that is Samantha's job to interpret that for us.
Yes, we've already double-checked with that, Joan. The agencies that are requesting
Thank
10%.
you. That's good enough. I trust.
You got it.
Veronica?
I'm sorry, I think I need some help understanding this entire conversation. So, because this is my first introduction to the concept of 10% core mission support, and I don't understand Can you explain, like, so one of the applications would have been an organization saying, we want like X amount of money for maybe like to hire and pay this person, and then also Y amount of money for like ABC equipment. So are you saying that can you go from there and explain where the 10% of what is going where?
So the 10% core mission support is made up of general expenses, general administrative expenses throughout an agency that agencies can charge to federal or state grants, and they don't have to provide any documentation. It's just 10% across the board. Now,
And
we
this is
can't do
10% of the grant amount?
No, 10% of their, so if we're doing it by quarter, that quarter's costs, any expenses that could be understood as, administrative general costs. Yeah, that's operating costs like electricity, admin costs. It's a wide range of expenses that fall under that category. Now, a lot of the a lot of the applications say they meant core mission support, but they didn't specify it directly. All they did was say general expenses to be covered, or just other reiterations of that. So they put 10% core mission support. It's coming to me. I don't have any backup documentation, so I sent it back. I need this backup documentation. They're like, well, it's, that's going to take us hours and hours to come up with that $1,000 that we're charging for that, or that $500. So we were coming up with the idea of maybe we allow them to charge administrative costs or general operating expenses in lieu of or in place of the 10% core mission support. So at least we'll have backup for what they're charging. But some of the contracts don't specify in detail what we need. So some of them would need amendments, but we need approval for that to switch from 10% core mission support as the scope in the contract to how you can charge some general operating expenses.
So you're saying, so not all of the contract awardees are asking for money for core mission support?
No, just a few of them, just a handful.
Okay, and the ones that did?
I was just going to say, in the ones that did, it was in their contracts that they could have general operating expense or core mission. The problem is just verifying on the back end when they submit it. So we did include it, but we didn't look at how difficult it would be for them to verify for $1,000, 10% of their core mission, and providing us all those invoices and canceled checks or bank statements.
I see, that makes sense, thank you.
So basically, the request here is to allow us to make some administrative back-end decisions about contract amendments to switch some spending from core mission support to operating costs. Does that sound right, Scott and Samantha?
Yes. It does.
Michael, I saw you had your hand up and then down. Do you want to say something?
Tracy just said it.
Tracy just said
the exact request is that allow us to accept administrative expenses in lieu of simply a 10% core mission. It's essentially the same thing. It's just the way that they show compliance is different.
Deborah?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. You guys are the experts on you and Samantha obviously are the experts on knowing what Treasury will accept. And I'm happy to give you the flexibility to hold the grantees to that standard.
Yes, I feel the same way. As long as our people feel good about it, then I feel good about it. Any other questions or comments? Randy has, oh good, thank you, Randy.
A thumb, not a hand.
Do we think this requires a vote?
I mean, it's up to you, Dan.
Yeah, I don't think it does,
I mean, if
but it is on the record.
What's the downside of
concerned about
voting?
it, I can always make a motion that we give them the flexibility, give MRB the flexibility to impose requirements outside of the wording of the contract to satisfy the Treasury requirements.
I'll second that.
Did you get some of that? Okay. Did that wording sound right to everybody that needs to sound right to? Okay. So could you repeat the motion one more time before we vote? Oh, you have it recorded, right?
Right. I think I can remember
Okay.
sort of what I said. I'm moving that we give MRB the flexibility to impose documentation requirements in lieu of core mission that meets the requirements of the Treasury Department for distribution of ARPA funds.
Feel good? Everyone's nodding. Okay, we're ready to vote then? All in favor?
You have to do roll call because Randy's,
Oh, yes, we do. And we did get seconded, though? Yes. Okay, sorry. All right, so roll call. Randy?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Deborah?
yes.
And I'm a yes. That is unanimous. Okay, thank you, everybody, for clearing that up. Anything else about core mission support before we move on?
Nope, all set.
Okay, we need to go back to the minutes approval, which was the third item on the agenda. Is there somebody that will move the minutes for August 7th? Susan moves. Deborah seconds. Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Veronica?
Yeah, and sorry that I'm only bringing this up now. On the third page of the minutes, the top paragraph, this was about what to do with the $6,000. It says members shared their opinions regarding which option they support. It was the consensus of the committee to take no actions on the funds without decisions, though they did not decide what it would eventually be decided for. I'm not entirely sure what that means, and I'm wondering if we could reword it.
Makes
Sure.
us sound very indecisive.
It was a consensus committee to take no action on the funds.
But I don't,
How about we just stop the sentence there? It was a consensus of the committee to take no action on the funds.
or no action on the funds at this time.
Yeah, I think at this time is,
How does that preserve the idea?
yes.
Okay, everybody feels good about that? Okay, we'll take that as a friendly amendment then. Any other discussion about the minutes? All right, let's have a vote. Randy?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And I'm a yes also. That's unanimous. Thank you. I believe we do not have a next meeting for this committee scheduled. We had been meeting every 3 months, although this is the 4th month because there's not a lot of action. Tracy, remind me, I think we had an informal discussion about going maybe to like every 4 months, 6 months next year. Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't think that because we'll mainly be doing the report out on what money is being dispersed. So I think if we want to plan on quarterly, not quarterly, like twice a year unless otherwise needed, that would be sufficient.
That's great. Okay. Does everyone feel good about that kind of schedule?
That would be May?
Probably. Hang on one sec. Veronica.
I have a question. Is the committee going to be the same members, or does this get shuffled like the standing committees?
Right, so I wanted to bring that up. So it can get shuffled, and we also may need to find a new meeting time based on the schedules of all the other committees. So we can't commit to an actual time at this moment, but our goal is to meet in approximately 6 months.
Yeah, so I think probably June or July would be a good time because right around May, June, we'll start to look at the projects that are, or we'll run through all of the unfinished projects and see who is on track to complete on time or before, at least before the end of 2024. And those that are scheduled to move out we're intending for them to go out to 2026, make sure that those are on track. And that way we'll have kind of a heads up at that point of projects that are in danger or might need to be reallocated. So June, July would probably be a good time frame.
So after we get our 2024 schedule finalized, which will happen in late January, we will work on scheduling the meeting in June, and then maybe we'll schedule one more for the year just to have it on the books. Sound good to everybody? And also, as Tracy said, if we need to meet for something else, we will just schedule that meeting. Great. All right, is there any other business before the committee today? I just want to thank everybody. I know this wasn't like the most exciting meeting, but we just needed to get together. We needed to air some of this stuff in public, make sure it's on the record, and just make sure there's no other issues that had bubbled up. So no news is good news, I think, right, for committees, right? All right, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.